weeks. I apologize, everybody. I've been in New York and Philadelphia. I have not been able to do the show. This has entirely been on me. Y'all can hog tie me and use tar and all that other fun stuff later, but yeah, just not right now. We have a show to do.
Is this still available?
No, this is not still available unless you can bring all of it yourself. If you want to fundraise for it, then, I can't stop you. I would just politely ask not to. Speaking of things not to do, we got to talk about the bird again.
Should not do Nadu.
Should not do Nadu. That said, real quick, we are the Spicy Tech podcast where we talk about all Magic formats, at least the ones that we actually care about, because none of us want to fake caring about Vintage. That said, I mean, unless Gale does, I don't know if Gale's secretly a Vintage aficionado.
I do watch a lot of Vintage content. I'm not the best, not the greatest on playing Vintage.
That said, as always, I am here with Gale and Biminem. Gale, how you doing?
I exist.
That is unfortunate in these trying times. And Biminem, how about you?
A quippy response to follow that up, so I'm here.
Well, I'm glad to know that we've decided to go with the asterisk response.
Exactly.
Didn't you get the memo?
I mean, there was a memo about what time we were starting, and I'm glad that I anticipated us not starting at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
It was great. It was great. Jess is just saying Gale's hoarding the Black Lotuses.
I sure am. They're all mine.
They're all yours 110% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
That is...
So if you play Joda, the Joda that makes Black Lotuses.
Oh, you're talking about Gareth.
One of those... Oh, I'm sorry? Oh, is it Gareth?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you run Gareth that makes the Black Lotuses. And then you run the stickers and the Infinity stuff. There's an Infinity card that says tokens stay existing as they move different zones.
Mm-hmm.
You can make Black Lotuses permanent.
Yes. I can also just... Man, if there was a sticker with the suffix ER, I can make the Blacker Lotus.
Sounds like Cards Against Humanity.
It's...
Jesus Christ.
The biggest, blackest lotus.
That all said, now that we're sitting here playing Cyanide and Counterspells, we got to talk about the bird more, and not because we're thinking about all the ways it can destroy Commander and Modern and all that, but just in general, the lack of response from Wizards of the Coast on Nadu. That's the part that's got me a little confused. MC Amsterdam happened. So we have not just Moto numbers, not just the player base having their low growl, rumbling, murmuring numbers. We have visual indicators and interviews from professionals about what impact this card has had on the game that we all enjoy. So, Gale, I know you've watched a bunch of the stuff from Amsterdam.
So all I can say is there's a lot of the bird.
There was a lot of the bird. I remember a couple of showcases that stuck out to me from the interviews. One was several of the pros saying that they did not know what the bad matchups for Nadu were. If the people who dedicate 40 to 60 hours of their week to competitive play do not know the bad matchups for a deck, that alone, to me, is indicative that the deck is kind of a problem. Because most people can go, yeah, Scam is strong, but it loses to Stone of Eric. Yeah, Hardened Scales is strong, but it loses to Stone of Eric. Yeah, Domain is strong, but a Pick Your Poison can gut it really quickly. Like, there's always some kind of thing, like Bad Moon stops Tron, or Blood Moon stops Tron. There's always some very quick and dirty, this is my bad matchup, this is the thing that hurts me. Like, I know that any deck that can run Urza's Saga tends to have an easier time against graveyard decks, because they have a built-in tutor for things like Grafdigger's Cage and stuff. Like, it's very easy to see which decks can rock, paper, scissors other decks out. And then you look at Nadu, and you're like, I don't know how to stop this.
Well, that's mainly because Nadu cannot be one for one.
Yeah, and
Like,
she
at
can't.
all?
It can't be bolted is the other problem.
Yeah,
Like
I think if it was
there's
three
there's
toughness,
an entire color in this game that cannot kill Nadu easily.
I think if it was a 3 toughness, we wouldn't have this issue.
If it was a 3 toughness, the issue wouldn't be as bad. It would at least give Red a better option. Because, like, right now, Red's got 2 ways of dealing with Nadu. A second Galvanic Blast, or a pre-deliriumed Unholy Heat. Which means they have to have those set up already against Simic Trust Fund money.
They unban Fury.
Well, honestly, funny enough,
Awkwardly, Fury does actually kill Nadu.
You bring the old villain from the last movie out of retirement as like a pseudo good guy for the next sequel.
You know what? Yeah, unfortunately, that does work.
It's just, I feel as though, and I know that the way the design process goes for Nadu, or for anything Modern Horizons, is they are tested rigorously within the confines of their own set. So this means that Nadu was tested in an environment that didn't involve Shuko, didn't involve Bonesaw, and didn't involve Lightning Greaves, which those are the ones that are currently on the chopping block in terms of problematic equipment for Nadu. Obviously, Shuko's the one people are going for right now. Bonesaw is the one people were going for on Arena, and Lightning Greaves, if they decide to go the Hogak route and knock out Shuko, then Lightning Greaves is obviously the thing that will be taken out next. So, I think the bird just needs to go. I really do.
I mean, I still think that zero cost equip spells are very, very, very dangerous. And I think that this is just in a precursor. I think all of them should go. Honestly, like Nadu, Shuko, Lightning Greaves, and not Bonesaw, because Bonesaw doesn't do anything.
No, the Bonesaw is literally only being ran to make Nadu work in a format that doesn't have access to 0 cost or 0 equip cards. Bonesaw costs 0, but it equips for 1. But
Yeah,
it forces your land base to be higher, though, because you have to have a higher frequency of getting targets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that the Shuko, Lightning Greaves, and Nadu should all go, because we're just waiting for another Nadu to break Shuko and Lightning Greaves again, and I really think that that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, is it kind of like what happened with Urian, where Urian came into the game and people suddenly started running decks that were higher than 60 cards, obviously for running Urian, but after Urian got banned, for a short while, there were still people running decks much higher than 60 cards because they realized, oh, we're starting to get to a point where consistency isn't being affected as much because we have redundancy to replace consistency.
Yeah, I think that what it's just kind of, I don't know. In my opinion, just like Lightning Greaves and Shuko are just not fair cards. Is what I want to say.
I think it's so. To play defense for Shuko, though, Nadu's the only thing I can think of that's really made Shuko as busted as it is. I know there's one other card that had some infinite combo with Lightning Greaves like a year or 2 ago in Modern, but I can't for the life of me remember what it was.
So the thing about them is that Shuko sees play in Legacy because of Cephalid Illusionist.
Mm-hmm.
And just that kind of effect, while honestly, without the ability to target your own things as easily with like Shuko or with Bristly Bill, um, those decks lose out on a lot of power because this effect loses out on a lot of power without Shuko, without Bristly Bill. It's still annoying to deal with, and I think should still probably go after thinking about it. But the fact is that Shuko and Lightning Greaves are just waiting for the next evolutionist, the next Nadu in order to be broken again. And they're not really doing anything for the format otherwise.
I think
It's
there's
too easy of a bullet to break in certain combos, and it's utterly irrelevant to all the other 99% of cards.
Exactly.
So it would have no impact to get rid of the card. Nobody would be sitting
Exactly.
there going, "Oh no, my Cole the Forge Master Goblin Bombardment Memnite combo doesn't work anymore."
Yeah, like have any of us ever seen anyone run Shuko before in Modern before Nadu was a thing?
No.
No.
No. The one deck that I saw that had an infinite equip combo was a deck that ran Lightning Greaves instead. But even then, Shuko has one benefit that Lightning Greaves doesn't, that wasn't really explored before, and that was that it can be grabbed with both Stoneforge Mystic and Urza Saga.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's the Pandora's box thing. Now that we live in a post-Nadu world, we understand that these cards can be grabbed and tutored by Urza Saga is the easiest card to slot into any deck. You cut a basic land, you put an Urza Saga in, or you cut a Triome and you put it in if you're not running Domain. You cut one less efficient land to put Urza Saga in, and then all of a sudden you have access to Grafdigger's Gauge, Pithing Needle, Soul Guide Lantern, Stone of Eric, and in this case, Shuko, in your 99. Not 99, in your 60 cards. Suddenly, it's really easy to just run those cards without worrying about them. Jassa says maybe ban Urza Saga. So once upon a time, I would agree. There was a brief bit during the Luris era where I did want Urza Saga banned because, God, having a deck that had both Urza Saga to tutor out something to go nutty with Luris with made it feel like it was an uphill battle to fight those decks. But I'm going to be honest, these days, I don't feel like Urza Saga is as important as it once was.
Urza Saga it's more of just the engine piece that can grab the next thing to then grab the next thing. But it blows itself up, so then they're a land behind. It grabs an artifact, but the whole time it's out, it's an enchantment, so you can just pick your poison them because they probably don't have a second enchantment out.
Yeah, Urza Saga loses to a lot of commonly ran things right now, and I'm gonna be honest, I've made the case on Twitter, and I think I'll make the case here. I think Pick Your Poison, at least at 1, should be ran in the main board of just about every deck right now. I'm willing to go out on that particular limb.
So my opinion is that unless you're specifically not green, then you're either playing Jeskai Control, and I'm probably gonna run something like March of Literally Light, because that hits an Urza Saga for 1 mana. Or you're just kind of just out of luck and you have to deal with it. Just hold that out.
Lately, I've not been feeling like Urza Saga is the problem. I'm like you, sir. It's like a couple years ago, I was like, oh man, Urza Saga is a strong card. Now I'm just like, all right, there's the engine, there's the fishing line, but I don't have to care about the fishing line. I just wait for the fish to come up on the end of the hook.
Also,
the fish.
Urza Saga loses out hard to very common things in the 60 in the sideboard. So for most decks, let's talk about Tron for a quick second. Tron loses to Blood Moon because Tron doesn't get to get its stuff online as early as it wanted. And then Tron got the One Ring, Now Tron can stabilize till turn 7 without worrying about what Blood Moon is doing to them. Tron stopped caring about Blood Moon a long time ago because it stopped mattering once they had the ability to block everything by sneezing into their Karn Wish pile. But outside of that, what other decks fold hard to Blood Moon? Domain, technically, if the domain deck isn't layering a ley line afterwards, or the domain deck isn't, I don't know, running some basic lands to back up their strategy. Urza Saga, on the other hand, if a Blood Moon touches the board, which can be in the main deck of Murktide decks, if a Blood Moon touches the board, what does the Urza Saga player do? They scoop up their cards and they wait. They scoop up their cards and they go to the next game.
They put the Urza Saga in the graveyard. That's also, what they do.
Another thing that can happen is Haywire Might can just say, no, that Urza Saga leaves the game. It doesn't go to the graveyard, it leaves the game.
Yeah, like it. I do want to focus on Pick Your Poison, though, as a great thing to counter most cards in the meta right now. So Pick Your Poison doesn't target Nadu, but does kill Nadu. It is sorcery speed, though, so bear in mind, if Nadu's on the board and it hasn't been answered already, they probably already get the win. Like, that's just what's going to happen. So more often than
for color control,
more often than not, Pick Your Poison is going to be going for the Shuko or the Lightning Greaves, or the Urza Saga that would be grabbing one of them. Just depends on where you're at. In the Murktide Regent matchup, it kills Darcy and it kills Murktide. In the Domain matchup, it kills the Leyline and the Scion of Draco. In the Hardened Scales matchup, it can straight up kill the Hardened Scales or the Urza Saga. You're never killing an artifact with this in that matchup. You're killing the enchantments that make the deck go ridiculously fast. In the Yawgmoth matchup, that's the only thing that I don't see Pick Your Poison being as amazing in, but disrupting the early mana dorks in Yawgmoth is still an okay thing to do. Not the best thing, but it at least keeps the card from being a perfectly dead card. The fact that it is a 1 mana out to a creature with flying specifically on top of an artifact, on top of an enchantment, means that most decks in Modern have something that this wants to hit. Like I said, Murktide, Darcy, Scion of Draco, the Leyline, it's the engine behind Nadu, everything falls to Pick Your Poison. The only weakness of Pick Your Poison is that it's a sorcery.
Now, as the domain player, there's a swear word that I hate for my deck, but I do want to bring it up because it can work against Nadu. Dress Down. Dress Down work against Nadu.
It also works against Urza Saga.
Yeah, it works against Urza Saga. It works against Nadu. Dress Down was a very powerful, emphatic answer to the format a couple years ago, and it never stopped being that. It's always been a strong card, but people kind of forgot about it. And, I mean, it was like $10, $15 at one point. I think this is a time in the meta where maybe Dress Down comes back.
Man, Dress Down was the bane of my Bogles deck for the longest time.
I can say, I think that it's really funny that CEDH plays Dress Down in like every deck possible, but Modern players just completely just don't look at it as a card.
It's such a strong card.
It's so good.
It enters every issue that you have that isn't exactly
you guys don't understand.
A creature that's not blocked.
I run Domain Zoo. My deck relies on Territorial Kavu and Scion of Draco. Please read that third sentence of Dress Down.
Yeah, creatures lose all abilities.
Territorial Kavu and Scion both just like Scion survives as a basic 4/4 artifact creature on the ground with nothing else, and Territorial Kavu just
dies.
fucks off.
Yeah, because Kavu doesn't have the Tarmogoyf benefit where he's like, I've got one arbitrary toughness.
Yeah, he's a star. So Territorial Kavu dies on the ETB of Dress Down. And it draws you a card. Like that's
and it draws you a card, yeah.
Yeah, it replaces itself.
It is a cantrip that also wipes out like all these problem cards in the format.
The only deck that Dress Down isn't super good against is Yawgmoth combo, because Yawgmoth.
No, it's good against Yawgmoth combo too.
Are you sure? Because I'm fairly certain that they just go, okay, wait a turn, and then kill you in upkeep.
Well, you see, the thing about it is that it depends on where you put where you put it down. Because if they've already set up, then yeah. But also no, because like
Dress Down could stop a mana dork early, I guess, if you did it like I Dress Down during upkeep.
So
but...
against Yawgmoth, you either want to do it in upkeep or just like so Dress Down against Yawgmoth is not something that I really consider in my deck outside of like control. Because
if you just wanted to have like a critical mass of things that can stop the combo.
Yeah. I would like if I was in any other deck, I'd probably not. If it's in your sideboard, I wouldn't put it in. But if it's in your main deck, I would take it out. But in control, I think this is a great card as just trying to like draw an extra card to draw a removal spell. Because if you can draw a removal spell, you're just chilling. Because it draws you a card. It replaces itself. So in a deck critical, like full of removal spells, you can go Dress Down into Lightning Bolt one of the things with Undying, and then suddenly they only have one thing with Undying, so they can't combo anymore.
Is either Pongify or Rapid Hybridization legal in Modern?
Both of them are.
Both of them are.
So you could literally Dress Down into one of those. Like if there's such a problem creature, because I'll be honest, Pongify and Rapid Hybridization used to
have Path to
in
Exile.
Modern.
We have Path to Exile.
Oh wait, yeah, you're right. But I mean, just in the same colors as Dress Down, if nothing else. Like, let's say the guy's not running white, they're not trying to mana fix for the white, whatever. If push came to shove and you just needed the card for whatever reason, whatever deck archetype you're running, to get rid of Nadu, I'd rather fight a 3/3 lizard with no abilities than a 3/4 flying I win game.
Yeah, that's true. Also, you can just Rapid Hybridization the Nadu, then bolt the lizard.
That's true.
That's such a dumb layer of interaction that one would have to go through.
And this is where the fact that it being impossible to like value trade for a Nadu is kind of an issue. Because all of the hoops that you have to go through in order to like even sort of go 1-for-1 with a Nadu, it being 4 toughness being the kicker. Because if you could just go Dress Down into Bolt, I think it would be like a little bit more reasonable and Dress Down would see more play.
So if Dress Down said, and all creatures get -1/-1.
If Dress Down also said that card would be insane.
Feels like it'd be a little busted at that point.
Not so, dude. I would play it in every deck, no matter what.
About, and I don't know any cards off the top of my head, but Gail, you have an encyclopedia between your ears. What about choose removal? So instead of target removal, choose removal. Is there anything like that relevant in Modern?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
Mostly it's just because the cards that had that kind of wording predated the type of wording we had in Mirrodin.
Yeah.
And that's about when Modern starts.
So the issue is that like outside of board wipes, choosing targets, like choosing cards is on very few cards, just like 3 or 4 cards that say that aren't specifically preventing damage. Because usually whenever you choose something, it's not a creature, it is a source of damage. And that is why it is not targeting it, because you cannot target a source of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Vexia asks, if Nadu is banned, will it affect Commander? So if Nadu is banned in Modern, that definitionally would have no effect on Commander.
If it is banned in Commander,
it would also have no effect on Commander.
Yeah.
Because you're all there's one table that's running Nadu, and that's CDH. That's it.
So the thing about Nadu is that whenever you play something against a quote unquote, the biggest air quotes here, casual Nadu deck, um, the game tends to end either pretty quickly or go on forever and you not be able to do anything because the Nadu players' turns take like 20 minutes to finish resolving all of their Nadu triggers.
It's obnoxious.
There is one person who I'm not gonna name that is at our shop that was vehemently defending Nadu in Commander. They also happen to have a Nadu deck, so that's take one and then go just roll the ball downhill and you'll find the other. But they were vehemently defending Nadu, and every single time somebody brought up every argument against Nadu, the play pattern problem, the fact that it creates a solitaire turn that's impossible to interact with, the fact that most of the interaction that can deal with it struggles because of exactly how it's built. It always creates a +1 for the person. It's like a more efficient Joyra that also punishes you for killing Joyra. Like, that's not a fun play pattern to deal with. And the person's just sitting there like, just remove it. It's like any Simic value commander, just remove it. I'm
Now,
like, I don't think that works here.
So I'd like to put a story. I'd like to tell a story.
Okay.
So I was playing against a person who at the shop who played a Nadu deck. And so I was playing my Saheeli deck, and the game ended with 5 Nadus on the table, every player having 1 and me having 2. and that is just like we just started copying it because it was literally the best card on the board.
Why would you copy anything else?
Why would you copy literally anything else? There could be an Eldrazi on the board. I'm still copying the Nadu because what are you gonna do? Nadu.
Now, it's funny. There is a card I've mentioned a couple times to deal with a certain problematic wolf. Because it uniquely just deals with Voha. It is modern legal, and it also just says, "Hey, bird, die." Lithomantic Barrage.
So, Lithomantic Barrage has the issue of being very bad in outside of its specific use cases.
It would have to be a sideboard.
Yeah, it would have to be a sideboard card, and if you have to sideboard that card, it's really bad. Because if they, for example, don't get Nadu, or they wait, or the fact that this is a sorcery.
It's a sorcery. That's the biggest problem.
The biggest downside is that in fact it's a sorcery.
Yeah, no, the sorcery is what kills it.
Yeah, so if they see, like, let's say you kill the first one with a Lithomantic Barrage, they're like, okay, thinking cap on, let's not play Nadu until we're ready to go off and go for the win.
Also, unfortunately, in Modern, in Commander, a Lithomantic Barrage is an okay response, because a Lithomantic Barrage will stop them from negating your removal, and if they're not winning with Nadu on the turn that they do it, it can disrupt a Nadu play, because the Nadu costs more. But in Modern, the next Nadu isn't costing more. They're just doing it again with more mana.
Now, question. What about... Now, this doesn't fix the first Nadu, but what about Extirpate? Or cards of that form, the Test of Talents that can just wipe the guy's entire deck?
So Test of Talents wouldn't...
I know, really, things... I'm saying things that have that.
So
the end is the only one that I think works here.
I say that if you can if you're playing, let's say, I don't know, if you're playing a control deck, right, and you can fit in a surgical extraction, being able to go counter the Nadu, extract the Nadu, and you get to see their entire deck list, I think is something that I was planning to. It's in my Jeskai control list that I'm trying to build. As one of the ways to deal with Nadu without having to give them plus 1,000,000. I think that outside of specifically either countering it or milling it, I think that those cards are just not worth it because they just don't do enough.
Yeah, that's the issue is that we're talking about Modern, which has I think 17,000 cards right now. And several of those cards are from the Horizon sets, which are power crept very, very high. We've got really good sideboard options for stuff, and none of them actively stop Nadu. Of all the good ones.
Is Assassin's Creed modern legal?
Yes, it is.
Smoke Bomb on their upkeep.
So Smoke Bomb is very bad. It's a bad card.
Really?
It is a bad card.
If we have to start running absolutely atrocious pieces in our sideboards just to make Modern playable.
Oh no, Nadu needs to be done. Like it needs to. I do feel it's on the horizon to be banned. But these type of conversations, as ridiculous as they are, the fact that this conversation does not lack validity, has a not zero amount of validity to it. Even though this is an asinine conversation to have, it also bears validity. Is evidence that the card does need to be banned.
I feel like so. I want to do two things. One, where Smoke Bomb's concerned, Smoke Bomb costs 3. The Nadu deck is probably already online by this point. I would
if you go first, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, so you could cast it on your main phase.
Right. So that's already something that players were angry about during MC Amsterdam, was that the dice roll at the beginning of the game had such a major impact on who won in the Nadu matchup.
Yeah,
like that's this is another solution that yes does stop Nadu, but it has all of the same problems that every previous solution that does stop Nadu stops. Vexia, the other thing I wanted to address is Vexia saying, I play Nadu in Commander without clones or equipment, just auras and cantrips with prowess creatures. It's probably the second most fun deck right now. Turns are shorter than most people I play against. And everybody can build a Commander deck that is built in such a way that it can be more fun for other people than most versions of the deck. The thing is, though, ban decisions in any game are not made, and they are never made, on the fringe cases of players that play a deck with the utmost respect for the people at their table. They are made based off of the common denominator.
The ceiling.
I think we can agree that the common denominator of Nadu decks do create toxic play patterns that are not fun for people in any of the formats where Nadu is currently available. This is in Modern and also in Commander, and I'm sure Nadu will end up being a problem in other formats later, but it just those two formats where I'm wanting to focus on, the play pattern for the Nadu deck is a solitaire play pattern that doesn't invoke the ability to respond to it in any meaningful way by the other players at the table.
I believe those are the two biggest formats played in Magic, or Commander and Modern.
Yeah, it goes Commander, Modern, Pioneer, Standard, Legacy. Legacy is bigger on Moto than Pioneer.
So if we just off the cuff without any numbers assume that 75 to 80% of the player base is playing either Commander or Modern, and you have one bird that is a problem in those two formats that make up 75 to 80% of what all is played, that's not good math. That's not good numbers.
in terms of, so in Yu-Gi-Oh, there is this lovely thing that exists called Tier 0 formats. We don't have a lot of Tier 0 formats in Magic, not really, but we are currently in one right now. Now, people are very, very misinformed on what the tier system actually is for card games. It is not a judge of how good decks are. It is a judge of how much decks are represented in a format. So, if a deck can hit 5% representation in a format, that's all that's required for it to become a Tier 1 deck. Now, I'm going to do a very, very quick check here. MTG Modern Metagame. Let's see what percentage of the metagame is currently Nadu. So, as of right now, Nadu is 11.2% of the meta. Now, that may sound like it's not the biggest thing in the world. Let me go ahead and give some numbers to put that in perspective. During MC Amsterdam, Nadu made up 28% of the decks on day 1. Does anybody here know how many decks were Nadu on day 2 after the chaff was weeded out in the first rounds?
56.
56%.
And then wasn't top 4 just 4 Nadu decks?
Wait, hold up.
Top 8 was 5 Nadu decks.
You said 28%
on day 1.
Nadu, and then 56. That is exactly double. That means every single Nadu deck from day 1 made it to day 2.
Yes.
Not a single Nadu deck lost on day 1 because the percentage representation doubled.
And that means when you go into the top spots, most of the decks were Nadu in the top spots. So while the Modo numbers show us that Nadu is representing 11.2% of the format, which is enough to make it a high tier 1 deck, followed by Jeskai Control, actually. Jeskai Control is currently the only other deck that has something close to the same percentage base as Nadu.
The thing with Modo, it shows this is a list of every deck list that people are bringing into the tournament, including the guy who has a favorite flavor crayon. Like, that guy's deck list is in that number, in that proportion.
Not for Goldfish. What Goldfish counts as 5-0 decks.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
Goldfish.
I know there are some that do actively count, like whatever gets uploaded.
That's the issue with
Moxfield.
that's the issue with not Moxfield, EDH Rec.
Yes,
EDH Rec's problem is that it doesn't have the ability to separate chaff from good stuff. Jasta says, what was that? Oh, I was going to say Jeskai or Necrobloom. Is Necrobloom even being ran at all in Modern? I haven't seen any Necrobloom decks nor any conversation about Necrobloom.
5-drop?
No,
it's a 4-drop, but like the payoff for the 4-drop is a 2/2.
Also, let's be real here. You have to have 7 or more lands with different names to get the 2/2. So unless you've ramped lands out, you're probably relevant on turn 7. He has to come out with 4 mana and then see another land enter, so he never even makes you a 0/1 until turn 5.
Yeah, Necrobloom ain't pushing it in Modern.
Also, he does die to a revolted fatal push. It's very important.
He does actually.
Because he's 4 mana.
Next 7, I think.
No, fatal push destroys something that costs 4 or less.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right, yeah.
So
it's the necropotent stack. Not
Necrodominance.
Yeah, necropotence. It's that's the other deck. I think that deck's just being called like mono black mid range right now though.
If I was gonna try to do landfall shenanigans, like if I was to the point where I had a Necrobloom in hand and I'm about to build a Modern deck, I'm building Bristly Bill instead.
Yeah.
Well, hey, guess what? Bristly Bill is in Nadu decks, though. That's a Nadu deck.
That's the thing is, if you're going to run a Bristly Bill Modern deck, hey, guess what? You're building Nadu.
It's not a great time to be in green and not be playing Nadu.
The other card that I think Sheoldred's Edict isn't going to do anything to Nadu.
They have a bunch of creatures all the time. Literally, the whole thing is a bunch of creatures.
Like, they get a bunch of non-token creatures before Nadu comes out, and then they have a bunch of token creatures after the fact.
Wait, no, not Sheoldred's Edict. No, I was mixing up Sheoldred's Edict with Flare of Malice.
Lutter
Mouse-
says, "Is the goldfish data based on online?" Yes, it is. And if Nadu does run into a lot of timer issues on Moto, then the 11% Nadu representation for Moto numbers matters even less. That's why I brought the MC Amsterdam numbers specifically, because I know that the Moto numbers say one thing. They say it's a tier 1 deck, but the actual numbers of what happened in the latest physical big tournament are indicative of what would be a tier 0 deck in other card games.
Oh, what's that? What you call it? The mono black commander that says whenever a creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, destroy it.
Horobi Death's Whale.
Yeah, Death's Whale. That would be a funny mono black commander to run. Just you sat down with Nadu. That's unfortunate.
Man, it would feel like there's a player in our shop that was playing a Tivit deck, and I forget which card it was, but it's the curse that says when a creature enters the battlefield, burn for 1. And I just dropped that curse on them. I forget what deck I was even playing that had it in it. And they just gave me the side eye of like, why would you do that? Just like, I've limited your moves to 40. You'll be okay.
Like, if you're running Tivit in casual, because I know Cirrus doesn't play CEDH, you deserve all the curse auras.
Yes, I agree. I agree 100,000,000%. If you play Niv Mizzet, like any of those 6-mana stupid flyers,
And what's funny is when they try to, they're like, but it's 6 mana. I don't care. Rituals exist, mana rocks exist, jeweled load. Like what? Like
Soul Ring exists.
6 mana is not a prohibitive mana cost.
Yeah, there's also like there's conversations for not on podcast about the way people view fast mana in certain situations.
I think this is a conversation for podcasts.
Oh, okay. Well, so if you are running a casual deck and you have a mana crypt in that casual deck, you don't have a casual deck. Rather, you have a deck that pretends it's casual and brought a loaded gun.
Yeah.
That's where I'm willing to just sit there and somebody can sit there and go, fast mana isn't all that it takes to make a CDH deck. Yes, but why are you putting the fast mana in your deck? My commander costs a lot. Okay, cool. So you accept that certain cards are very powerful that are balanced around their mana costs, and you are trying to circumvent those mana costs. That's no different than using something like a reanimate spell. You're entirely right. It is no different, except for the fact that those cards are in the 99, and you've got to find them. Let's have a follow-up conversation about tutors in casual Magic.
Hold on. I gotta pause. Superstar Earth in the chat asked,
Fuck the Moxes.
What about the Moxes? So the Moxes are both less I have a kind of conflicting opinions on the Moxes. Most of them I'm not a particularly big fan of.
Are we talking about the Power 9 Mox instead of
the Mox Opal, Mox Diamond.
The ones that are available.
Yeah, because those like Chrome Mox, I think the downside is too small.
Chrome Mox is the imprint one, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. It is strong. It's $80 for a reason.
The Mox Diamond, I think is like it's expensive. I don't think it's it's whatever most of the time. I don't think Mox Diamond is too bad, but it's the issue with Mox Diamond is that it's expensive.
It's like $600 or something.
Yeah. Let's see. Mox Opal requires you to jump through some hoops to turn on, and it can be easily turned off by any artifact board wipe. So, so can all of them because they all just die.
Mox Opal the one that does with the legendary creature you control or something?
No,
like
Mox Opal's the Metalcraft one.
Metalcraft one. You have to have 3 artifacts.
That's right.
Yeah, like if you have exactly 3 artifacts and you say get Crozen Gripped, your Mox Opal can no longer tap a mana until you play another artifact. Which is
the one that does basically the Mox Opal, but based on the legendary creatures.
That's Mox Amber, which was what I was getting to next.
Okay.
Yeah. Amber requires you to have a legendary creature. I think Mox Amber is like the fairest of them all, and I'm not happy when I see a Mox Amber but I'm fine with it as long as it's not a Displacer Kitten.
So my thing with fast mana in general is I begrudgingly run Soul Ring. I run it because it's a thing that everybody is going to have to begin with, and I never feel great about the games where I open with it. And even if I open it with it in my hand, players who've played with me long enough probably have noticed that Soul Ring never comes down on turn 1. It's usually coming down turn 2 or 3, mostly because I want to avoid the psychic damage that comes with dropping a Soul Ring turn 1 to the rest of the table, and it barely affects your acceleration to play it on turn 2 or 3 anyway. That said, in a world where Soul Ring was banned, I'd be a happier player. In a world where Mana Crypt was banned, I'd be a happier player. This is because Commander, as far as I'm concerned, is not the place for power. It is the place for big, shiny, powerful things, but it is not the place for power in the same way that power exists in Standard or Legacy or Modern. In those formats, everybody is constantly having to be paranoid over whether or not their cards are coming out on curve, coming out on time, if the card is going to be able to make an impact. And this is one of the reasons why, for the longest time, 90% of Magic cards didn't get to actually see play, because once we started getting a shaped competitive meta with online conversations, the cream of the crop basically rose to the top in all competitive formats, and everything else got relegated to draft chaff pretty quickly. Commander was the one place for most of that stuff to go. If we start accepting that we should, in casual Commander, start jamming all of that fast mana, all of those tutors, everything into our decks, irrespective of that, we create the problem again where all of those cards now no longer have a home anymore. And I'm not saying bad cards desperately need a home. I'm saying cards that were always just okay, but couldn't heck it in a world of Murktide Regents, should still have a place where they are able to be played. A Necrobloom deck is basically impossible to play in a format where everybody is shitting out ridiculously fast mana, and the deck goes, I made a lot of tokens, is that okay? Like, there's tons of everybody's favorite Commander decks that basically fall by the wayside the minute we start talking about just injecting thousands of dollars worth of power.
All right, so and I'm gonna hop in right here because Superstar Earth followed up with turn 1 Soul Ring is very important for CMC Commander.
No.
And I think that is the biggest.
That's the problem.
That is the biggest problem of going turn 1 Soul Ring, turn 2 4 mana Commander. Is turn 2 you're at 4 mana when everybody else who didn't start with a Soul Ring is at 2 mana. And then if they play it like, and they have to spend the whole second turn probably playing like a 3 Visits or something, and then you're already have played your 4 mana Commander and you're got off to the races. And that's kind of the issue with Soul Ring, and why I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Let me tell Superstar Earth a tale of Captain Sisay. Captain Sisay.
Lord,
getting her out on turn 1 or 2. I'm talking about 2-color Captain Sisay, the deck I've had built for 11 years. If I get a Soul Ring in that deck, my chances of winning that game are north of 80%, even at a 4-person table.
Yeah, so the thing about Soul Ring, I'm not the biggest fan. Like, it's the fast mana occupy this space of being. I don't want to. It's not. It's never necessary. I think that if you're going like I think that Soul Ring, all that should not be necessary. That's just a product of the fact that Soul Ring is still legal in the format. So it is required because it is a card everybody has access to.
Also, just as a matter of critical mass in a deck, if we're willing to say, hey, you're allowed one piece of fast mana and that piece of Soul Ring, I'm also willing to say, yeah, you're allowed to have one tutor. Just make it a vamp tutor if you want. I don't care. As long as your deck isn't, 15 tutors desperately trying to find your infinite combo, and that's the only way you know how to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I agree with that one because I would like those kind of limitations in a casual deck, but like in order to get like it would have to be like a overarching rule because I'm not gonna deal with house rules when I'm trying to go out to like fucking California and play a game and they're
Yeah,
like,
correct.
oh,
We do need consistency in the game.
Every LGS bans Nadu. There's a universal house rule that every shop all has. They all ban Nadu.
I do have a very quick story about the power of Soul Ring and how it can affect the way the game gets played when you're done, Gale.
just the last thing I was gonna say is that they brought up something really important is about Canadian Highlander, and I 100% agree. Canadian Highlander does it perfectly. It does exactly what I want Commander to do. I just wish that more people either play Canadian Highlander or Commander just took up that system because the way they do the how many strong cards you get in the deck can solve like all the issues in Commander.
I love this. So I didn't know what Canadian Highlander was. So I looked up on Gatherer, and the snippet little summary that Wizards types about it. First, it's played in a competitive way. You are trying to get your opponent dead, and there are no two ways about it. That is Wizards' own words about Canadian Highlander.
As for the Soul Ring conversation, so I was playing in the tournament, the casual tournament, this last weekend, and had a game where there was a Mothman player and a Beckett Brass player, and both of them got their Soul Ring Arcane Signet openers back to back. I mean, one of them was a talisman, but that's basically the same thing. Let's be honest. And so I didn't get, aside from like a fertile ground, I was playing Galea. I didn't get any ramp, and the Dogmeat player in front of me wasn't drawing anything at all. They kept a hand that had no colored mana.
Yikes.
It was a very strange thing because I was like, they kept the hand with Rogue's Passage, and that was cool to see. And then they were naturally drawing into all their other lands, so of course they ended the game with 4 lands.
Yikes.
So as we're playing the game, it was like there was one game happening on the right side of the table and an entirely different game happening on the left side of the table. Now, I ended up winning this game because of the side effect of 2 players opening the Soul Ring. They proceeded to beat the piss out of each other all game and then didn't have the math to kill me when it came time for it. I got down to 2 life, and then I top decked onto Inversion, reset the game state, and then went, all right, and now I win. But here's the issue. Was that game fun for anyone involved? Because I know somebody's going to be like, see, you won the game and you didn't get your Soul Ring. The other people did. But the problem isn't whether I win or lose. That's never my concern going into one of these games. My concern is, was this a fun game for everybody involved? And unequivocally, the answer was probably no. Probably no. And I think that's...
I think maybe literally the only people who had fun are the people who got the Soul Rings.
Yeah.
And if one person gets a Soul Ring and you don't immediately blow it up, like the enjoyment of that game, it sinks by like a magnitude of like 10.
Yeah. And
you go from like having a lot of fun to having no fun at all.
If one guy has a Soul Ring and the other 3 don't, it's gonna eat up at least 3 interaction cards from the other 3 players that don't have the Soul Ring to bring that guy back down to level. If 2 or more people get a Soul Ring,
don't even bother.
don't even bother, and anyone who didn't get the Soul Ring is just having the least fun game of Magic
They're
Gathering
playing a
possible.
different game entirely.
Yeah.
The only thing that saved me during that game was the fact that I literally land passed for 7 turns in a row. The only thing that saved me was that nothing that I did looked relevant in relation to the Soul Ring players. And to be fair, nothing I did was relevant in relation to the Soul Ring players. I got a Tuvasa and a Griff's Boon. That's where I was. That's all I did. So I think a lot of people don't really know what their goals are when they go into playing Commander. Because it's like the only way to really play Magic anymore, most of the time, let's be honest. I have Pioneer decks, I have Modern decks, but that's because I desperately want to play those formats, and how often I get to play those formats is very, very limited. Most people play Commander because it's the only thing around, but when it comes to why they're playing Commander, it's very hard for them to articulate. What kind of game you're looking to get into, sometimes people don't know that. So they'll bring in baggage from, like, they wanted to play Modern. They couldn't play Modern, so then they played Commander, but now they play Commander like Modern. And then they get their shit wrecked socially because everybody's asking them why they're running 12 tutors and 6 pieces of fast mana. And then you get the opposite side, which is equally bad, where you get the Commander players who walk into Modern expecting the same stuff that worked in Commander to work in Modern. Now suddenly, because we actually had that happen at the store with Biminem. Not him walking into Modern not knowing what was happening.
With the glue dripping out of my mouth, like, come on, let's go.
But no, in the sense that there was a player who was late for the tournament, and they got there, and they were playing their, like, very, very Timmy Elves deck. It did stuff, but the stuff that it didn't matter in the scope of Modern. But this is a story for Biminem, not me.
I had 2-0 trounced the guy. There was never a turn where he was in any. He couldn't even see me ahead of him in the first place. It was, and I run Domain. I run a deck that has been on the radar of the top 10 list consistently for the last 2 years without a break. It has always been at least on the outskirts of meta, played it, famous tournaments. Like it has never not existed. Mine's a little bit different. Mine's not the full blown meta list, but it's still Domain. It's still Sign Draco. It's still Leyline the Go. All that. The guy walks in with an elf ball deck, putting out a bunch of 1/1s and stuff like that. But my deck is very burn heavy, very removal heavy. It's got lightning greaves. Lightning greaves.
It's got lightning greaves.
I need to stop talking about Nadu. It has lightning bolt in it. It has lightning helix. It has tons of removal. Tons of blow that thing up. It's got Haywire Might. It's got Leyline Binding. It's just, if I want it, like, if I don't draw my Scion of Draco or my Territorial Kavu, then you're going to have a bad game because none of your stuff is sticking. I'm blowing everything. If I don't get stuff, you don't get stuff. So, I think, yeah, and then even this, Cinderclasm. So this is my own homebrew sideboard card for Domain after Fury got banned, because Fury was a crucial part of the Domain deck prior to his ban. And I needed something that could go wide snipe a bunch of creatures off my opponent's board after Fury left. And I saw Cinderclasm, and my Domain deck runs Cascade. So I'll put out Shardless Agent or Bloodbraid Elf, and then I'll flip through deck to hit something else to cast. Cinderclasm lets me pay the red at my leisure when cascading into it. So I can either do 1 to all creatures on the board, or do 2, even if I cascade into it. I just choose to pay the red kicker on top of the cascade. So Cinderclasm was an obvious slot in when Fury left. This guy was running his red elf ball. Game 1, I didn't need Cinderclasm because it's not in my main board, it's in my sideboard. Game 1, I just trounced him anyway. Game 2, he starts getting out like 5 or 7 1/1s, whatever. And, of course I sided in the Cinderclasm, because why wouldn't I? Well, I draw into it and I just go, I'm sorry. Just tap this mana. I'm sorry. I don't even think I cascaded into it. I think I just hard cast it. And I didn't even pay the kicker. I just did 1. and it just wiped his whole board. He had been setting up all these elves, and then his whole board just went away. And it's just the fact that when you're running these modern decks, and if you bring in the Timmy deck and you have an emotional investment into the Timmy deck, I'm sorry, but you're not gonna have a good time.
So this kind of speaks to one of the problems that exists in a game with multiple formats, where people often get pigeonholed into playing certain formats. People's relationship with this game can get really strange, because you can harp and haw about how players should be having fun, and so if they're not playing the biggest, strongest thing available, then they should still be able to have fun. I agree with you, and that's why I am such an advocate for Commander. Commander is a brewer's paradise when it comes to the breadth of things you can do and the ways that you can go about playing the game. This is not me saying that Modern is not for players who like Commander. I like Commander. I used to hate it, and then one of the people at this table dragged me kicking and screaming into it.
You're welcome.
I dragged you into Modern. But where I think people need to understand what they're walking into. If you walk into Commander with that Modern mindset of, well, I drew the thing that ruins your day, fuck off, and that's the only mindset that you have, you're gonna end up having a smaller and smaller play group as time goes on, because people aren't going to want to play with you, because you start viewing the game as a zero-sum fun game. The only people who matter are you, yourself, and you.
I grew up loving chess. I played it as a kid. I played it as an adult. I love playing chess. You and I stumbled upon a life-size chessboard at a park one time,
Yep.
and played it. And I barely won. I had one piece up on you. There were 3 pieces left on the board. I beat you by a single turn. That was barely.
I love chess as well.
Yeah. 0 out of 0 people play chess to sit there and move the rook back and forth between 2 spots every turn, because that is effectively what you could parallel playing a Timmy deck to in a competitive 1v1 format like Modern. Are you making the decisions that make sense to win the game? If you are, then you are playing chess and you are moving the pieces where they need to go. If you are not making the decision that makes sense to move you towards winning the game, then you are sitting there saying, okay, move rook to a4, okay, move rook to b4, okay, move rook to a4, okay, move rook to b4. And that is what you're spending your turns doing. If you are not making the decisions to move toward winning the game, then you are not moving the pieces toward the guy's king.
And bear in mind, if you're making every decision to win the game in the game, but during the deck building process, you're spending a lot of your time picking your favorites instead of picking the cards that are most efficient for play, in Modern specifically, then you need to remember the deck building process is as much a part of this game as sitting down and playing it with a person. Hell, there are people at this table who actually might enjoy building decks more than they enjoy playing the game at all.
Gail.
Hi, Gail.
Wow. Why, hello there.
How's it going?
Like, you called me out so hard because I'm sitting here building a deck while you have the deck.
If you build a bad deck, then you step into that chess game with 15 pawns and a king.
Mm-hmm. I think that, so building a deck that works. So I'm of the opinion that I don't like to take lists off of the internet. What I will do, however, is look at the decks that are similar and see what their end goal is. So if I want to say, like, before, back in the day when I had my original Just Sky control deck, what everybody was playing was Azorius control. But I really wanted to play Chandra, the Torch of Defiant. It's the whole reason I want to build a deck. So I look at them and I say, hey, what are these decks trying to do? They're trying to slow the game down, remove all, like, not necessarily remove all the things, but have answers to everything, and then they can win the game through attrition. Okay, so I build a deck with that in mind. Now, these people who come from a commander are saying, hey, I want to play. This is modern, right? I get to play 4 of this card, right? I want to play 4 of this card. Is it a good card? No. But I will still play 4 of it. Is it a good choice for the metagame? What's a metagame?
But see, like, if we're talking Commander, that's an entirely okay line of thought. But if we're talking Modern, it's an okay line of thought if you're willing to accept the emotional burden that comes with that, which is this card, this pet card of yours, will likely lead to game losses. If you're okay with that, then we get to go in and have a fun time. Just like in Modern, within the slew of competitive Modern decks, you accept that there are weaknesses that every deck has. My deck desperately needs dies triggers, and I only have 1 card that allows me to circumvent my need for dies triggers specifically. So if we're in a situation where somebody drops a Stone of Eric on me on turn 2, my deck's probably going to fold to it unless I get Ozolith specifically. I accept that as a weakness of my deck going in, so I don't have an emotional investment when I see that Stone of Eric come down and turn my deck the fuck off.
And to be clear, part of the reason we're talking about this, because I didn't state it in my story, the elf player got mad and scooped, and well, I mean, he didn't scoop the game. I 2-0'd him.
He scooped the tournament.
Upon losing the round, he got mad, stormed out of the building, and dropped the tournament after round 1. Like the guy went in with a Timmy and got mad and left. I'm sorry, but you sat down at a chessboard with Uno cards instead of pieces.
And that's,
as long as he sat down at a chessboard with checkers pieces.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're wanting to make fun of the guy or anything like that. Absolutely not. This is mostly used to illustrate the problem of walking into these formats without understanding what the point of the format is. Modern, Standard, Pioneer, these are hyper competitive formats, and if you're walking into them without any game knowledge, or if you're walking in without the pieces necessary to function, then it is better for your mental health to walk in understanding that you are on the back foot. There's plenty of players who love playing on the back foot because they love the feeling of winning while being on the back foot. In fact, that would be a Johnny. A lot of times, Johnny-style players do enjoy that kind of game a lot, as opposed to Spikes that want to win at any cost at all. And then Timmy's, they really like the smell of rubber cement for some reason.
Every format, what every player has to accept is that this is a global game. It is owned by $1 billion company. It sells millions of dollars of product a year. This game is larger than you, and every format is larger than you. You cannot walk in there and say, well, I expect the game to go X. We don't care. The format has pre-established scenarios. Modern is going to be a competitive format above a fun-having janky format. Casual Commander is going to be a fun-having janky format above competitive. And you don't get to change these things. This is bigger than you as a player. So when you have to accept and decide what formats to play based on what you want to do, knowing that you can't change the format, knowing that you can't change the other 3 people at that table.
So when you walk into a Modern format and you are like I was, where I desperately wanted to run Broodstar in Affinity. I so wanted to run it. And I ran it for, I think, 1.5 years. And had a decent track record with my Affinity deck, probably in spite of my love for Broodstar. But if you're walking into competitive formats, you accept that if I'm running non-competitive cards, that might bite me in the ass. If you are walking into Commander and people get angry at you for running a deck that is too fast, or running a bunch of tutors, or is staxing people out of the game, it's the same thing. It's the same thing as the Modern player going, hey, you walked into a yard that had a set of rules and you decided not to abide by the rules and now you're upset. It's the exact same thing. CEDH does exist if you want to have a game that doesn't have a Rule Zero conversation. And that's really all CEDH is just Magic the Gathering's Commander format without a Rule Zero conversation and with a far more surgical precision for deck building. That's it. Superstar says, unless you learn the meta so well to force a card into the meta like Death Shadows, but that requires losing so many games with so many different results. But see, I don't think
You'll never force the meta. You could
No.
monkey wrench as much as you want by yourself as a single person, but you would
can-
have
you
to
can
start
force
a
it.
wave. You
You-
have to start
Yeah.
a ripple.
That's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it does require a lot of just like you have to either be like just like a god at a format, or you can just say, hey, I know what cards in I know what the meta is right now. So I know how to literally just pinpoint the one weakness the format had. So like when Death Shadow was really huge in the format had a lot of issues with, closing out games out. Like this is like, so because there was no more Splinter Twin, there's all none of that. So closing out games through a big ass creature, kind of hard. So Death Shadow, they saw that and they're like, okay, I can get down really low. There's not a lot of burn to go over the top with, so I can just sit there at 2 life, be perfectly fine, and then kill people with this 11/11.
And then people start citing in stuff like this because you decided to make Death Shadow a thing. I love Fiery Justice. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
People did actually do that.
Just like, this is my Death Shadow. It's huge. All right, this is my Fiery Justice. Would you like to gain 5 life? Cool. Or just kill the player, because it will kill them before it gains them the life.
Yeah, or Tribal Flames, because domain.
Well, the difference with Tribal Flames, though, is that Tribal Flames doesn't have the option of just killing the Death Shadow. Fiery Justice kills the Death Shadow unless they're at 11. Because if the Death Shadow is at 10, it hits them for 5, and then gives them 5 life, which subtracts the other 5 from the Death Shadow's toughness.
The Death Shadow is 20 minus, right?
It's
Yeah.
a 13.
13
It's
minus?
13 minus your life total.
So
high-
if your life total is 7, it would be a 6/6.
Yeah. If your life total is anything above 2, the Death Shadow is dead.
And if you're in the situation where the Fiery Justice can't kill the Death Shadow, it just kills the player. Like, it's... Ultimately, you're able to... Even with Death Shadow, though, what was happening was there wasn't a Death Shadow deck that was made. It was more that the previously existing Tarmogoyf, like, Jund mid-range deck became more known for the Death Shadow after the fact, and kind of like a Ship of Theseus thing.
And then after the Death Shadow, like everyone was like, "Oh wow, Death Shadow's kind of good." And then they started building around the Death Shadow itself.
Well, suddenly, like, Is It Prowess became a lot more popular for a brief bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, like, Is It Prowess with the top end of Murktide Regent was able to go, man, Darcy dunks on Death Shadow.
It does.
It's impossible to defend yourself in Death Shadow against a Darcy without having access to constant fatal pushes and bolts. And eventually, you run out of fatal pushes and bolts. But the only other thing that I kind of wanted to bring up today, which we got into the inverse of it, was slow playing a little bit. And it's mostly just a frustration with people. Let me paint a scenario for anybody who may have been in this particular situation before. So it's turn 2, right? And a player draws their card, and then they play a land, or they play a fetch land, for instance. They crack the land, and they start going into their deck. Now, they're specifically looking for, say, a trio. Maybe it's a shock land. Don't know. And they're digging and they're digging and they're digging. And at about the 2-minute mark, somebody at the table pops up and goes, "Do you have a follow-up move?" And they get their triumph finally, drop it on the board, and go, "No." And then the turn gets passed to the next player. Now, technically, legally, per the game rules, I understand that the player needs to finish out their action before the turn ends. However, none of us want to be in a 5-hour Commander game. Unless you do, in which case, please don't play with me, you're a psychopath. None of us want to be in a Commander game that is that holy farking long.
We do have a story about a Marwyn player, though. Because I was in a pod with him, and then he went to your pod. And my God, he refused to pay an ounce of attention during either of the other turns. And then during his turn, would sit there. I bitched at him when his turn 2 land pass crossed the 7-minute mark. And he did not tutor. He sat there. Now he was like shaking a little, but I actually think he might have like Parkinson's. I don't think it was like an anxiety thing. But he was sitting there. He was like doing the thing where he riffs his cards, like shuffling through them in his hand, deciding what to do. He would put a land out, put it back in his hand, put a land out. It was a Harwin deck. It was mono green forests. They were all basics. It didn't know which land. His turn 2 eclipsed 7 minutes.
And
I bitched at him. He finally passed.
the only reason that we even know it was 7 minutes is our tournament had a timer.
Correct.
we got to look at the timer and just go, oh.
Because his turn 1 took 4 minutes, so I knew to look at the timer when the second turn started.
No, when I had my match against him afterwards, I played Pantlaza, and I proceeded to make the game end at about 10 minutes because I did not have time for that, nor did I want that.
He took forever to make his decisions for his turn, and he was playing too strong of a deck. He won on like turn 4 or 5 at our pod, because he had tutored up like 4 different creatures. Like he was tutoring out the wazoo, and then just wins. Like he tutored up a Koof and cast a Koof on turn like 4 or 5. To put it in perspective of how he won.
So for me, I want to point this out again. This is not aimed directly at the player. This is
no.
This is showcasing an instance where this happened to elucidate a common problem that a lot of players have probably felt in games, where a player doesn't pay attention to anything going on in the game, so they have no idea what they're doing when it comes time for their turn to begin. And as a result, you get these 2 to 3 hour long Commander games that they make it so that you don't get a chance to play more Commander games. Like, we all want to be able to play enough games that we feel like we've gotten a chance to play a few of our decks. And when we're having a Commander night, when we're having a night somewhere, we want to feel like we got to do stuff in those games. I feel like the perfect setup is when everybody in the Commander game had their deck go off and do something interesting, whether or not that interesting thing won the game. And for the games to end probably before about an hour, so that you can have more games. That way, if you've got like a day off and you've got 8 hours, you've got about 5 to 8 games you can play in that amount of time, allowing you to do the other thing that all Commander players have: shuffle through your other decks. Because Commander can be a very cheap format. Players have lots of decks. We want to be able to showcase the fun little things that we built.
But nothing feels worse than sitting at a timed round, having your deck do what it's supposed to do. Maybe not pop off like to full blown, but like 95% pop, right? And get up to the precipice, get to the climax of the movie, and then the guy before you sits there trying to think of a way to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, takes 13 minutes doing absolutely nothing with a deck that has a 0% chance of winning, and costs you the ability to take your turn because it goes to time. Nothing feels worse than that. If
Yeah.
you're sitting there and you are so hung up on, but this is going to be the last turn. There's 2 minutes left on the timer, and I have to find a way to make these 3 lands and this one that someone gave me from a Forbidden Orchard turn the win. I just have to make everyone else lose 37 life. How do pass the goddamn turn?
And
You don't have the win.
And honestly, there's a few ways to solve this, though. It's not just be considerate in general that solves this issue. There's actually like tangible ways that you can affect this scenario. One of them is goldfishing your deck. If you've built a new deck and you're so excited to play it, take a few minutes, shuffle the deck up on your own. Trust me, you already wanted to do this before you get into the game because nobody likes having all their stuff clumped after you've had your deck sorted.
Oh, it's the worst.
But shuffle your deck up a few times before you sit down, and do this before you get to the card shop too. It's a good habit to get in. Shuffle your deck up and play it out in just an imaginary scenario. Nobody's interacting with you. You're just going through the motions. This is how your deck should feel. Just maybe dump interaction cards out of your hand as you draw them, because naturally you would need to use them to get rid of problems. And just play the deck out. See how it feels to play. What this will do is it will cause you to have an active effort all the time in your deck's decision making. And you'll start to see lines of play, because in Commander the lines can get very complicated. You'll start to see lines of play that you will be able to reference later when you sit down to the Commander table. You'll see a hand filled with familiar cards and go, oh, I know the sequence I need to play these in to get maximum value, and you'll just do them automatically. If you goldfish your decks more, you'll get more familiar with the things your deck can do, and it'll also help you to realize if you are in an unwinnable scenario. If you know your deck well enough, you'll know if you've got an out for a particular scenario. You'll know if you've got the gas. If you just...
The first one to pass if I don't have it. I'll be like, no, I don't got it. Land, try to do something, does nothing, pass it. Let's see if you can clips the game. Like, I like to see if someone is able to close it, you know?
And it helps a lot during... I'll let you go in just a second, Gail, sorry. It'll also help a ton while you're goldfishing. That lets you understand your own cards really, really well. But after you're done goldfishing, when you're sitting down at the table, as other players are taking their turn, familiarize yourself with the cards that are coming down. So, like, if I see somebody drop down a Tooth and Nail, I know that needs to be stopped now. That is a now, the game is going to be over if we don't situation. If somebody's been holding up a counterspell for like 5 turns, now is the time to begin political negotiations with that player. Period. Like, there are certain things that you'll start to recognize. Like, the Aristocrat player drops down the Zolaport Cutthroat, and then a Blood Artist, and then a Sir Conrad. By now, you should probably have the alarm bells on the next card that comes down, because if you don't board wipe them now, you will never be allowed to board wipe them again and keep your life total. And these are common things you'll see, especially if you're playing with a group of friends a lot. You'll start to notice their cards. You'll start to recognize, oh yeah, when they play Prosper and then Reign of Riches, the clock has started. I need to do things now, as opposed to, okay, now it's my turn. Let me take a look at the board state. Okay, what's going on here? What did you play on your turn? Oh, how many counters does the Reign of Riches have on it? How many treasures are you at? Like, yes, you should be asking those questions, but you should also be paying attention as the turns go on to be considerate to the other players at the table.
My thing is just also what I think that people should get into a habit of is planning out their moves in advance. Because like you can have like it doesn't have to be like a thorough plan of I'm gonna play exactly this card and then I'm gonna do this. But being able to be like, okay, I need to find, let's say it's turn 2, and you're like, okay, I probably want to play a ramp spell. Right. And then you can be like, yeah, that's going to be my turn. I don't have to really think about it. I'm going to play a round spell. But then if your opponent plays something like a Janus Magistrate, or like specifically like this happened to me. I was gonna play round spell, and then somebody played the 3-mana Ash Jock that says you can't search your library. I was like, well, can't do that anymore. So had to change my whole plan.
That Ash
But
Shot's so good.
but like barring those kind of like just like completely game like rule altering effects, you should have a plan going into your turn so that you can just draw your cards, see if it changes your plan at all. And if it doesn't change your plan at all, do your original plan.
Yeah,
Yep.
the steps of the turn shouldn't be untap, upkeep, draw, figure what the fuck you're doing. It should be untap, upkeep, draw, do thing that you were already planning out during the other guy's turns because you were actually paying attention to the game. I notice a lot of the guys who sit there and have to figure out what they're doing on the turn are people who almost seem to have like ADD and don't pay attention during other people's turns. They're maybe on their phone or looking around or just kind of dirtling. And a lot of people will sit there and think, well, no, I'm looking at my hand and reading my cards during other people's turns. Fantastic. You know how to read cardboard. You're not
you
looking
should
at
be
board
able.
state.
Now you should be. But see, this creates that fun paradox where if you were paying attention to your own cards as much as you thought you were, then you should have a plan for what to do by now, because you've been considering your own cards for that long. Now, if you've been paying attention to the board, you should have a good idea of what's on the board state. Either way, you've solved half the problem.
I think the only time you should be really reading the cards in your hand is number one, after a wheel. So you got a new hand, or number two, at the beginning of the game. Otherwise, you should know what cards are in your hand.
Yeah.
I also feel like once you've put a card in your deck, you probably know what the card does.
And that is
Yeah.
also why I have been shifting to running. So I hate foils. You guys know I hate foils.
Yes.
But I have been shifting to running exclusively foil on my searchable lands. If I have any deck that can be, any land that can be tutored, I make sure to foil it to the best of my ability. I've been switching into that.
Hey, don't encourage that. That's cheating.
How's that cheating?
If you make a conscious decision to get only certain things in foil so that you can find them easier, that means that when you shuffle, there is a likelier chance that people can like see the difference in the card, like the way that it
Like if it's a Pringle?
fits. Yes.
Well, yeah. Don't run Pringles. Like that goes back to
so
I'm just
saying that like if like technically by all technicalities, if one card is foiled in the deck, the whole thing should be foiled. If you go into this is why I say if you go into a tournament, like a big modern tournament, don't play any foils.
Wait, so there's actually like if you go to like the high stakes stuff, there's actually a rule against having some foils, not some foils.
So the thing about the issue is it's the pringling of the foils. So any slight like Pringle can make it so that a foil could be considered a marked card.
Mm-hmm.
So
but what if you're running something that truly has no Pringling?
You have to have something that is truly no Pringling, and we all know the print quality of Magic Gathering.
Yeah.
So
can I offer a counterpoint?
Mm-hmm.
Wizards of the Coast should not make it impossible to play official trading cards printed by Wizards of the Coast.
Well, see...
Oh, like cereal boxes?
Exactly. Wizards of the Coast... I'm sorry. No. I understand Judge Program, all that stuff. I understand that. I'm putting my foot down in disagreement. Wizards of the Coast should not print unusable cardboard, and if the card I pulled happens to be unusable cardboard in a tournament, it should be on Wizards of the Coast to supply either a proxy card or a replacement card, because now that means I have damaged product from Wizards of the Coast.
Hey, that's not a me problem. I'm just saying. I'm just advising. I'm just trying to give people advice in terms of playing foils. and in their tournament decks.
I'll add an asterisk onto it then. In all my decks where my land can be tutored because it has a land type like like 3 visits can grab a triumph type thing. I run foils. I also, because I didn't realize it needed to be said, make sure those cards don't Pringle because I hate any Pringles in my decks. Period. I never ran Pringles anyway. But it just I tutor lands faster when the lands I'm looking for are foils. It makes my turns go quicker.
Yeah.
And I obviously, and if you're going to follow this advice, because it's actually very convenient advice, it's a nice life hack. Don't put Pringles in the deck. Make sure they're as flat as the non-Pringles. Truly as flat. Double sleeve the deck if you need to. If you need a little rigidity, you got a card that has like a 1% curve to it. Double sleeve the deck. Oh, for the love of God! I ran into this problem on Saturday. Dude had like 25 to 30 cards in his deck, double sleeved. The rest single sleeved.
Oh, please!
And
I have to.
He was very unhappy with me that I told him that he could be disqualified for the tournament for it. And I told him, I said, I will buy you inners. He was like, and I said a couple times, he's like, man, I don't have the money for it. I'm like, dude, it's like a couple bucks. I'll buy them for you. I'll spot it between the rounds. I'll go buy it for you. And but for the meantime, for the rest of the tournament, unsleeve these doubles. And he was mad at me for it, but I think it was more of just like he hit a wall that he didn't expect to be there, and it just didn't sit right with him.
Yeah, I've had to get onto so many people about slaving. Like they might get like a valuable card, quote unquote valuable card, and they'll put it in an inner sleeve, and then they'll put it in their deck, and then I just look at them and like, okay, but wait, hold on. If the whole deck double sleeve, they're like, no, just this one card. So there's a funny story about people having issues with the way that they sleeve their decks. So it's really funny. One time I was playing in one of the old car shops before the one we go to now.
They get a very "how dare you" when you say something to them about it.
It was a person playing an Emery Lurker of the Locks deck. They had they had played a card, right? And it confused me for a minute, and I looked at it because it was thicker than the other ones. I was like, "Why is this thicker?" I was like, "Hold on, let me see that card." So he handed it.
It wasn't the thick print from the
No. He had two cards in the sleeve.
What? He had 2 cards in there.
He had 2 cards in the sleeve. So I handed it back to him. I said, "Pick one of those cards. Leave that card in the sleeve. Put that card back in your hand. Leave one of the cards in the sleeve, and take the other one out the deck."
Was it 2 different cards?
It was 2 different cards.
Why were they in there?
I don't know, but he did not like that. And he's like, this is a thing still like that. There's a group of people that would still hang out that were at that table, and they still make fun of me because I said, if you don't take that out, I'm not playing this game with you anymore. And he didn't want to take it out. So I was like, okay, and I scooped up my cards and I left.
Imagine you sit down with your buddies to play Super Smash Bros, but one of your buddies demands to sit directly in front of you so you can't see the screen. Does that sound like a fun game, guys? Does that sound like 4 people having a good time? No? Then don't do whatever that guy did.
Speaking of which, we should have a Smash night.
We really should.
We should. Maybe one of these days when we'll talk about it over
tacos.
Tacos.
I'm glad that rain cleared out because I was about to leave y'all high and dry.
It turns out as well, tacos are happening in a few minutes because we are about to be done.
Yeah. 3 minutes over.
That said, I want to go ahead and I know that I've said it before, but I'll say it one more time. None of the examples that we bring up ever on this show are specifically to like demean the people involved. It is going, hey, here is a real life example of the exact thing that we are talking about happening in a game so that we can use it as a springboard there. Now, if we
also make sure, because this is something the 3 of us have discussed before, we have discussed between the 3 of us that we will never use an example that is common to people outside of the 3 of us. Like, for instance, me and Cirrus talking about the Marwyn guy. No one outside of me and Cirrus and Gale know about the Marwyn situation. So
I
it's not like
I didn't even know about the Merwin situation. I'm
weren't
gonna be real.
there.
Oh
for the
yeah, you were
Marwyn
there. Yeah, you're
situation.
right. Yeah. So like, it's never us bringing something up where someone could go, "Well, but I was across the room." No, like it's literally, we are very careful to pick examples that only exist on the horizon or the perspective of the three of us.
Now, if the person who this situation was about just happened to be watching the show, that is
That's on them.
That
If the shoe
is on
fits,
them.
feel free to lace it up and wear it.
That said, I do want to go ahead and thank everybody for coming out today and watching. I greatly appreciate it, especially since it's been so long since we've been able to actually do a proper show. Again, mostly on me. I've been traveling. Do we have any final words from either of y'all before we go and stuff our faces with delicious meat?
I do have a question for Gale real quick. If I have Hikori Death Whale out and I put out a mithril coat,
Yeah.
would the mithril coat targeting go on the stack and then Hikori's self-death go on the stack on top of it?
That is correct. That is exactly how
So
it
you
works.
actually can't mithril coat to save Hikori from himself?
Correct. So what you can do is you can Hikori play a dress down, then equip a mythical coat to him.
But Hikori couldn't be your commander then.
Correct.
I'll have to find a workaround.
Oh, you just have to find a way that gives that blanket either gives your creatures
Indestructible or
indestructible.
something.
Yeah.
I'll have to do something. But I really want to build a Hikori Death Whale mono black deck. I don't know how good it'll be, but I just want to see how disruptive I can be to other people being able to target their own stuff.
That said,
my ending comment is we should always be able to bolt the bird. That is all.
Yeah.
when the bird can't be bolted, life is bad.
They need to buff bolts.
I do want to end us on one specific thing, though. And I can't grab the image from Scryfall because Scryfall doesn't have this image yet. But I would like to leave you all with something very comforting, just in case you needed it today.
Oh, no.
Just allow me a moment for my computer to go on the fritz. There we go. Here, everybody. Never forget that Tree Karn is real, and Tree Karn can hurt you.
Oh, is this that from the new set?
Oh, my eyes. My eyes.
Tree Karn is real.
I
hurt
need
you.
I need artwork of this worked into Ocarina of Time memes.
Oh, the memes are already flowing on Twitter. The great Karn tree going, yes, I will pass away soon, but do not grieve for me.
Also, the raised eyebrow, he's like, huh, I really wish I wasn't seeing what Link is doing behind that bush over there right now.
Should also be noted that the squirrel behind him is dressed in green.
Oh my god, I am
like
shook. I am shook.
Link in Ocarina of Time wears green.
Yeah.
The specific clothing that the man he's wearing is green.
Ocarina of Time.
I'm sorry. I have to go. I'm sorry. All right.
The facial expression
Tree Karn can't hurt you.
Tree Karn can hurt me because it did. Like, I'm in physical pain now. Thanks.
It's like those memes. The therapist. Tree Karn isn't real. It can't hurt you. Tree Karn. Colon.
All right. Thank you all for coming out. We're gonna go get tacos.